The details of Prime Minister Boris Johnson's highly anticipated Brexit proposals have been delivered to Brussels. But along with them came an ultimatum to EU leaders. Take my withdrawal deal or the UK leaves without one. The EU's response to the UK government's plans: there's positive advances, but still work needs to be done. Mr Johnson told his captive audience at the Conservative Party conference in Manchester that he was submitting constructive and reasonable proposals, including new plans for the contentious issue of the Irish backstop, as Neil O'Reilly reports.
A rapturous welcome for the Brexit saviour, as most Conservatives would see him. They were expecting Boris Johnson to give a rousing speech invoking a glorious vision of Britain's post-EU future. And that's what they got, sprinkled with a few surprising asides.
This is not an anti-European country. We are European. We love Europe. I love Europe anyway. I love it.
Johnson's Brexit plan, unveiled in the morning press, involves a significant shift on the Irish border, though he did restate previous commitments on the issue.
And today in Brussels we are tabling what I believe are constructive and reasonable proposals, which provide a compromise for both sides. We will, under no circumstances, have checks at or near the border in Northern Ireland. We will respect the peace process and the Good Friday Agreement.
The Prime Minister gave few details, but he indicated the UK, including Northern Ireland, would be leaving the EU's customs union.
And, at the same time, we will allow the UK, whole and entire, to withdraw from the EU with control over our own trade policy from the start.
His proposal is presented as a take-it-or-leave-it offer to the EU. He stressed what would happen if Brussels chooses the latter.
Then let us be in no doubt, conference, of what the alternative is. The alternative is no deal. And that is not an outcome we want. It is not an outcome we seek at all. But let me tell you, my friends, it is an outcome for which we are ready.
UK Conservatives chose Boris Johnson as their leader, believing only he can push through the Brexit they want without further delay. Now it's time to deliver. Neil O'Reilly, Euronews.
Well, let's cross over to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who is in Brussels. He's been following developments all day. The EU's responded saying there are some positives, but more work needs to be done. There's only 2 weeks until that EU Council summit. Will there be enough progress made, Darren?
Well, interesting, we've had an awful lot of reaction this evening to that actual text, which was delivered here in Brussels by the British government a matter of hours ago. As you say, there are some positive signs in a phone call between Jean-Claude Juncker, the Commission President, and Boris Johnson. He spoke about those positive moves by the British government, but went on to say, Oliver, that the President also noted that there are still some problematic points when it comes to this issue of the governance of the backstop. Also, in addition to that, we've heard from Leo Varadkar. He is the Irish Prime Minister. He also has spoken to Boris Johnson this evening. And again, he talks about wanting to listen and to read in detail the proposals from the British government, but adds that the proposals do not fully meet the agreed objectives of the backstop. And also tonight, to add to that woe, we've heard from the Brexit steering group in the European Parliament. They've met with Michel Barnier, been briefed on that. And in the last hours or so, Guy Verhofstadt, who chairs that committee, says that they are absolutely not positive about Prime Minister Johnson's proposals, saying it doesn't provide the necessary safeguards for Ireland. So all in all, given that reaction and given the fact that, yes, the EU have said they are willing to look at these proposals and carry out negotiations over the coming days, not necessarily intensive negotiations, but talks nonetheless. To answer your question, ultimately, can a deal be struck in the next couple of weeks? Here at the European Council on the 17th and 18th of this month, you'd have to say that's looking pretty unlikely at the moment.
But let's just imagine for the moment that there is some consensus to be found and the deal goes back to the UK Parliament where the Prime Minister doesn't have a majority. Is there any chance in that scenario that he would get the deal through Parliament in London?
Well, there are three things that essentially that Boris Johnson needs to achieve in this text that's been issued today. Essentially, is it negotiable? Well, at the moment, the EU kind of seem to be saying, possibly not, but we'll give it a go. Second of all, can he get it through the UK Parliament? And an answer to that, you'd have to conclude, given the fact he hasn't got a majority, that seems pretty unlikely. So for the European Union, the thought process is, even if we do move and we concede some ground in this, it potentially still wouldn't get through Westminster. So why should we do that, given the fact that also Boris Johnson is legally bound to ask for an extension if he can't achieve a deal? And the third point is it practical? And people would point to the use again of technology, which is at the heart of the text that Boris Johnson has sent to Brussels today, that essentially you can get around a hard border in Ireland by using technology in other customs centres elsewhere in the island to deal with that. And if the technology isn't there yet, it will be in a couple of years' time, so they don't really need the backstop. Again, Brussels simply aren't convinced with that kind of hope and aspiration that there will be solutions further down the line. So on that point, they would again say not enough has been achieved. It's a complicated picture, but it is one, I think, where we're sat tonight, where it is looking very unlikely that there will be a deal between the UK and the EU on this basis. And maybe, and I'll suggest this finally, that the EU are willing to go along with appearing to at least give this a chance. Because in the end, if there is going to be a blame game for a no-deal Brexit, that the EU can at least say, well, we tried our best, we did look at this, we did talk about it, but ultimately it simply wasn't enough.
Thanks, Darren. Darren McCaffrey, our political editor in Brussels there. Well, for more reaction on these proposals in Dublin, I was joined by Dara Callery, Deputy Leader of the main Irish opposition party, Fianna Fáil. He told me Mr Johnson's plans for the Irish border are unacceptable.
The proposals, as we have seen this evening, involve the re-establishment of a border on the island of Ireland. That's completely unacceptable to us. It's unacceptable in the context of the Good Friday Agreement and the progress we have had on our island since then. It's unacceptable in the context of an all-island economy, the importance of that economy. It's unacceptable in the context of the extra costs it will put on businesses on our island to operate. So what has been tabled this evening certainly is not what we want and not what we can support at this stage.
Is it disappointing that we've got this far?
Well, look, European negotiations generally take time and they always wait till the last minute. What's disappointing is that we have been told that the British government and the Prime Minister keeps telling us he does not want checks on the island of Ireland. He keeps telling us he respects the Good Friday Agreement and he believes in the Good Friday Agreement. He keeps telling us that he will table what he terms technological solutions. We have seen nothing in relation to the detail of those solutions. And I fear that the British Prime Minister Johnson, hasn't shown that he fully understands what the Good Friday Agreement means, the importance of having no border on our island, the values of the Good Friday Agreement. He hasn't demonstrated yet, and certainly these proposals certainly do not demonstrate that he understands the importance of that agreement and everything that agreement has achieved since 1998.
So do you think that UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is being serious in trying to get a deal here, or is he in some way trying to shift the blame to the European Union, as some critics have said?
Look, I'm going to accept that he's trying to be serious, and that the response tonight from President Juncker is that they're going to engage in the detail of this. So in the engagements that are going to come over the next few days, that detail needs to be fleshed out and put out on the table. Nobody wants a hard Brexit, and particularly here on the island of Ireland, we do not want a hard Brexit. Brexit wasn't our choice, but what we want is an orderly Brexit that respects our island, that respects the Good Friday Agreement, that protects our economy. And as the lead opposition party here in Dublin, that's what we're seeking to achieve.